The relationship between the United States and the European Union has long been a cornerstone of the global order. However, recent times have witnessed a marked deterioration in this crucial partnership, particularly in the realm of trade. Under the administration of President Trump, trade tensions have escalated dramatically, culminating in a series of tit-for-tat tariffs that threaten to plunge the global economy into chaos. The US, citing national security concerns, has imposed hefty tariffs on steel and aluminium imports from the EU. In retaliation, the EU has responded with counter-tariffs on a range of American goods in a targeted way, igniting a trade war that has sent shockwaves through global markets. This trade war, characterized by acrimonious rhetoric and protectionist policies, represents a significant departure from the principles of free trade that have underpinned the global economy for decades. The ramifications of this dispute extend far beyond the economic realm, impacting political alliances, geopolitical stability, and the very fabric of the transatlantic relationship. As tariffs bite and businesses on both sides of the Atlantic brace for impact, the world watches with bated breath, uncertain of what the future holds for these two economic powerhouses. The current trade war is not an isolated event, but rather the culmination of years of simmering tensions and divergent approaches to trade. Understanding the historical context of US-EU trade relations is crucial for comprehending the complexities of the current situation. Only by examining the root causes of this dispute can we hope to find a path towards resolution and prevent further damage to the global economy. The current trade war between the US and the EU is not without precedent. Indeed, the two economic giants have a long and storied history of trade disputes dating back to the early days of the European project. From the Chicken War of the 1960s to the Banana Wars of the 1990s, disagreements over agricultural subsidies, market access and regulatory standards have been a recurring theme in US-EU trade relations. These disputes, while often resolved through negotiation or adjudication by the World Trade Organization, have left a legacy of mistrust and resentment that continues to color the relationship today. One notable example is the 2002 steel tariff dispute. Then, US President George W. Bush imposed tariffs on steel imports, including those from the EU, citing a need to protect American jobs. The EU retaliated with tariffs on US products, leading to a protracted legal battle at the WTO. The dispute was eventually resolved through a negotiated settlement, but not before causing significant economic damage and straining transatlantic relations. The 2018 imposition of tariffs on steel and aluminium imports by the Trump administration, once again citing national security concerns, rekindled these tensions. The EU, along with other trading partners, responded with retaliatory tariffs, setting the stage for the current trade war. These historical disputes highlight the cyclical nature of US-EU trade frictions and underscore the importance of finding lasting solutions that address the underlying causes of these recurring conflicts. The immediate catalyst for the current trade war was the Trump administration's decision in March 2025 to impose a 25% tariff on steel imports and a 10% tariff on aluminium imports from the European Union. These tariffs, justified on the grounds of national security under Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962, were met with immediate condemnation from the EU and other trading partners. The EU, arguing that the tariffs were unjustified and protectionist, quickly announced plans for retaliatory measures. The EU's response was swift and strategic. It employed a two-phase approach, carefully calibrated to inflict maximum economic and political pain on the US while minimizing damage to its own economy. Phase 1, implemented on April 1, 2025, saw the reinstatement of previously suspended tariffs on a range of US goods, including bourbon whiskey, motorcycles, jeans, and orange juice. This initial wave of tariffs, targeting iconic American brands and industries concentrated in politically sensitive states, was designed to exert pressure on the Trump administration and its Republican strongholds. Phase 2, scheduled for mid-April 2025, is even more significant in scope. It will introduce additional tariffs on over €18 billion worth of US exports, including cosmetics, clothes, wood, soybeans, and other agricultural products. This second wave of tariffs is designed to inflict more widespread economic pain across the US economy, hitting key agricultural states that are traditionally Republican strongholds. In summary, while the door to negotiation remains ajar, the risk of a protracted trade war looms large, with profound implications for transatlantic relations, global supply chains, and economic stability. The coming weeks will test whether both sides can find common ground or if this tit-for-tat tariff spiral will define their relationship in 2025 and beyond. Trump threatened 200% tariffs on French and other EU alcohols if the EU tariffs of 50% on US whiskey are not removed immediately. The escalating trade war between the US and the EU has sent shockwaves through global markets, injecting a potent dose of uncertainty into the global economy. Stock markets on both sides of the Atlantic have reacted negatively, with the Dow Jones Industrial Average and the S&P 500 experiencing significant declines. European markets have followed suit, with major indices like the German DAX and the French CAC 40 shedding value amidst growing investor anxiety. The trade war's impact extends far beyond the realm of stock market volatilities. Businesses were trying to recover from the economic shock of the COVID-19 pandemic, are now facing the prospect of disrupted supply chains, higher input costs, and reduced consumer demand. The tariffs, by increasing the cost of imported goods, are fueling inflationary pressures in this era of globalization and the global supply chain, eroding consumer purchasing power and dampening economic growth. The ghost of synchronized global stagflation may be quite visible under a full-scale Trump trade war. The uncertainty surrounding the trade war is perhaps its most pernicious effect. Businesses thrive on predictability, and the current environment of tit-for-tat tariffs and bellicose rhetoric makes it difficult for businesses to plan for the future. This uncertainty can lead to delayed investments, reduced hiring, and slower economic growth as businesses adopt a wait-and-watch approach. The ongoing trade war has not only roiled financial markets but threatened to disrupt global supply chains and also exposed deep political fissures within and between the US and the EU. China is emerging more powerful from trade to tech in a major geopolitical shift post-Cold War era. In the US, the Trump administration's aggressive trade policies have been met with a mix of support and opposition, while some segments of Americans, particularly those in industries that stand to benefit from protectionist measures, have applauded the administration's tough stance on trade to protect American interests and to make America great again. Others have expressed concern about the potential for economic harm and damage to America's global standing. The trade war has also exacerbated existing political divisions within the EU. While the EU has presented a united front in its response to the US tariffs, there are underlying differences in how individual member states view the trade dispute and the best way to address it. Some member states, particularly those with strong economic ties to the US, are wary of escalating the trade war and favor a negotiated settlement. Others, however, are more willing to take a hard line against the US, arguing that the bloc must stand up for its interests and defend the rules-based trading system. Beyond the immediate economic and political fallout, the trade war has broader geopolitical implications. Trump has repeatedly claimed that the European Union imposes exorbitantly higher tariffs and VAT or sales taxes on US goods, creating an unfair trade relationship. Trump has long argued that EU tariffs on US goods are much higher than US tariffs on EU goods. Some key comparisons: cars. The EU imposes a 10% tariff on US car imports, while the US only imposes a 2.5% tariff on EU cars. Agricultural products. The EU imposes high tariffs on US agricultural goods such as beef, up to 25%, dairy from 20% to over 50%, and certain processed foods like peanut butter, which faces a 25% tariff in the EU. Industrial goods. The EU's tariffs on many industrial products are higher than those imposed by the US, but both sides have areas where their tariffs are relatively similar, around 3.5%. Reality check. While the EU does have higher tariffs on certain US goods, especially in agriculture and automobiles, US tariffs are also high on European agricultural products, alcohol, for example, whiskey, wine, and luxury goods. VAT or sales tax on US goods in the EU. The EU applies value-added tax, VAT, on all imports, including those from the US. VAT rates vary by country but are generally between 17% and 27%. For example, Germany 19%, France 20%, Denmark 25%. The US, on the other hand, has no federal sales tax, only state-level sales tax, which is much lower, typically 4 to 10%. Trump sees this as an unfair tax on US exports, arguing that it artificially raises prices for American goods in Europe. Reality check. Although VAT is not a tariff, it applies to all goods, including those produced within the EU. However, VAT can make US goods more expensive in Europe compared to similar domestic products. The US does not have federal VAT or sales tax, but state-level smaller sales tax, which means European products don't face a high tax burden when imported into America. Trump has threatened to impose tariffs on European imports to retaliate against what he calls unfair trade practices. In his 2024 campaign, Trump has proposed universal tariffs and hinted at raising tariffs on EU cars, luxury goods and industrial products if elected. The trade and tariffs dispute has further strained transatlantic relations, already frayed by disagreements over issues such as climate change, NATO, the Ukraine war and the Iran nuclear deal. The trade war has also created an opportunity for China, which is eager to position itself as a champion of free trade and a reliable partner on the global stage. Seeking common ground, can negotiation prevail? Despite the escalating rhetoric and the imposition of tit-for-tat tariffs, both the US and the EU have expressed a willingness to negotiate a resolution to the trade dispute. However, significant obstacles remain, and the path to a negotiated settlement is fraught with challenges. One of the main stumbling blocks is the Trump administration's unpredictable and often confrontational approach to trade negotiations. The EU, for its part, has insisted that it is open to dialogue but will not negotiate under threat. The bloc has also stressed the importance of upholding the rules-based trading system embodied by the WTO, and has indicated that it will not hesitate to challenge US tariffs through the WTO dispute settlement mechanism. Finding a mutually acceptable solution will require both sides to show flexibility and a willingness to compromise. The US could consider offering concessions on issues such as agricultural subsidies or market access for certain European goods. The EU in turn could explore ways to address US concerns about its trade surplus with the US, perhaps by increasing its imports of American products. However, any agreement would need to be comprehensive and address the underlying causes of the trade dispute, not just the symptoms. A world watching global implications of a trade war. The trade war between the US and the EU has repercussions that extend far beyond the borders of these two economic powerhouses. As the world's two largest economies, their actions have a significant impact on the global trading system and the health of the global economy. The trade war has already injected a significant degree of uncertainty into the global economy, dampening business confidence and private investment. The tit-for-tat tariffs imposed by the US and the EU may also disrupt global supply chains, forcing businesses to rethink their sourcing strategies and potentially leading to higher prices for consumers worldwide. Moreover, the trade war risks undermining the rules-based trading system that has underpinned global prosperity for decades. If the US and the EU, two of the system's principal architects, are seen to be flouting the rules, it could embolden other countries to do the same, leading to a downward spiral of protectionism. The trade war also has geopolitical implications. The dispute has further strained transatlantic relations, weakening the Western alliance at a time when it is facing challenges from Russia and China. The trade war has also created an opportunity for China to position itself as a champion of free trade and a reliable partner on the global stage. As the US and the EU retreat behind tariff walls, China is actively seeking to deepen its economic ties with other countries, potentially reshaping the global balance of power in the process. The future of US-EU trade towards cooperation or conflict. The future of US-EU trade relations hangs in the balance. The outcome of the current trade war will have profound implications not only for the economies of the US and the EU, but also for the future of the global trading system and the broader geopolitical landscape. Will the US and the EU manage to overcome their differences and find a path back to cooperation, or will the trade war escalate, leading to a further breakdown in transatlantic relations and a fragmentation of the global economy? The path towards cooperation will require both sides to demonstrate a commitment to dialogue, compromise, and a rules-based trading system. The US will need to temper its protectionist instincts and recognize that its economic interests are best served by working within the framework of the WTO. The EU, for its part, will need to be willing to address legitimate US concerns about its high tariffs and sales tax on US automobiles, agri and dairy products, and market access issues. However, the path towards escalation remains a very real possibility. The Trump administration's unpredictable and often confrontational style of diplomacy makes it difficult to predict how the trade war will play out. If the US continues to pursue unilateralist policies and disregard the concerns of its trading partners, it risks further alienating its allies and pushing the global economy closer to the brink. Charting a course towards trade peace. The trade war between the US and the EU represents a significant challenge to the global trading system and the broader international order. The tit-for-tat tariffs, the acrimonious rhetoric, and the erosion of trust between these two economic giants threaten to undermine decades of progress toward a more open and integrated global economy. The stakes are high, and the consequences of failure are significant. Finding a path towards trade peace will require both sides to prioritize dialogue, compromise, and a commitment to the rules-based trading system. The US and the EU must recognize that their economic and strategic interests are best served by working together to address the challenges facing the global economy, such as climate change, technological disruption, and rising inequality. The world is watching closely, hoping that the US and the EU will choose the path of cooperation over conflict. The future of the global economy may very well depend on it. Europe, EU now has to stand up on its own feet after being dependent on the US for almost 80 years. EU has to build its own military force and foreign policy. Europe now has to make a security deal with mighty Russia, rather than too much Russia-phobia, leading to the Ukraine war. EU also has to accept China as the #1 superpower in terms of economy, technology and development, and keep good relations for mutual benefit rather than too much dependency on the US, which has no policy stability like under Biden and Trump admin. But Trump may blink on his hawkish tariffs narrative after seeing the Wall Street meltdown and concern by Real Street, including his billionaire advisor Musk, whose Tesla is now facing higher tariffs for its parts, and the dilemma of high prices if built in America. Tesla, US, is already raising its tariff concern officially with the USTR. But Trump may eventually stick with his reciprocal tariffs and sales taxes narrative with US trading partners for a level playing field. In that sense, the EU has to compromise to some extent. However, countries like India, the global king of tariffs and sales taxes, or GST, may have to adjust significantly, which may be a blessing in disguise for the overall Indian consumers and the economy, but may not be good for the local producers, doing business in a highly protectionist environment for decades after decades. Indian policymakers and producers may have to chalk out plans to improve domestic efficiencies rather than encourage inefficiencies.